Hello and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Institution of Mechanical Engineers and presented by IdeaGen. Today's webinar will be about unifying your information using email to eliminate project delays and rework. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that we will be taking questions throughout the presentation and the speaker will be on hand to answer these in the live question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Please use the Ask a Question box to submit questions throughout. You can also use this box to let us know of any technical difficulties that you are having, and we will do our best to resolve those for you. I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Liam Jones. Liam is a senior client manager at IdeaGen. Liam has been helping organizations globally reduce risk, improve information visibility, save time, and take back control of project correspondence for over 3 years. I will now hand over to our presenter, Liam.
Thank you for that introduction, Evie. And as you mentioned, today we're going to be looking at unifying your information, looking at using email to eliminate project delays and rework. And you've already mentioned, I'm one of the senior client managers or account executives here at IdeaGen's Mail Manager and have been for over kind of 3 years now. So in terms of a bit of an agenda, in this session, we will cover the project management landscape for architecture, engineering and construction firms and delve deeper into what the single source of truth actually is and why it is so important. We'll explain how to reduce risk, delays and rework by using technology and how you can transform your information management with machine learning. So in terms of the current state of play in the project landscape, globally it's changing at an ever kind of increasing speed, and there's no difference within the architecture, engineering and construction industries, or as we like to call them, Mail Manager, the AEC industries. I'm sure you've noticed in your own work, technology is continuing to rapidly evolve and drive the AEC to become safer, cheaper and quicker. And today there are numerous examples of how technology is revolutionizing the AEC sector. For example, artificial intelligence, virtual reality and BIM. It's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now and teams either working remotely or in kind of a hybrid working environment, it's become more and more difficult to access project information. AEC professionals like yourself tend to rely strongly on consistent communication, and this might take the form of pitches, winning clients and day-to-day communication with your colleagues. The days are gone, or certainly limited, where you can turn around to the desk next to you and ask your colleague to help you find an email, for example. And what this means for a lot of people is that they don't have access to the information they need and they're left out of the communication loop. And as you can imagine, this is a huge problem with over 347.3 billion emails expected to be sent and received every day in 2023. Email is the most used communication and collaboration tool across the world, but it's the one thing most people manage differently, creating huge risks for the future. And one of these risks comes in the form of project rework, and a recent study found that 80% of project professionals spend half of their time on rework, and poor communication costs $62 million every year on average. Reworks don't just waste your time and money, but cause huge communication breakdowns within your team and with your senior executive teams and stakeholders. So IdeaGen's Mail Manager, we run an annual survey called the State of the AEC Project Management Research Report, which aims to discover the project management and collaboration challenges facing businesses globally in the architecture, engineering and construction industries. The report explores how firms manage project information, where they store it, and how they go about retrieving data when facing legal disputes. Plus, it provides insights into how the industry has been affected by the current global economy, including the cost of living crisis, supply chain issues, and the latest building regulations. As you can see on the screen, this year we surveyed over 550 AEC leaders from businesses around the world, with majority of respondents coming from the United States and Canada. Our respondents work in varied roles in their organizations, kind of C-suite, presidents, etc. And before I move on to kind of the next slide, what I'd like to do is just launch a quick poll for everyone who's on the session with us today. In the projects you work on, what percentage of correspondence is via email? What we'll do is we'll leave this up for a few moments, and then Evie's going to go through results. Maybe you're working closely with an external architect on some design updates, or potentially you've been copied into kind of countless emails from other people on your team. But roughly, how much of that project communication do you think happens within your email inbox? As I said, we'll just leave that up for a few minutes to give everyone a chance to respond, and then we can have a look at the results. Perfect. I think we're just going to gather the results in now. Thanks to everyone who did manage to vote.
Okay, so 50 to 75% was the highest received, with 45% of the poll going to that, and 70 to 100% received 42.5% of the vote, whereas 26 to 50% received 10% of the vote.
Okay, so yeah, so quite a lot then. I mean, that's normally what we find. The vast majority of communication is going to be through email, but that's really interesting. Thank you everyone who did vote for that one. So I guess let's jump into kind of the main findings of the 2023 report. So the first one is that the majority of firms cannot easily access their project information, and we found that only 10% of respondents were not concerned about the accessibility or visibility of their project information. So most see this as a big challenge, and in fact only 2% of respondents never need to retrieve emails from past projects, so very minimal. Second, over a quarter of organizations are at risk when staff leave the business. So our research has found that more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as part of the offboarding process when people leave the business than they were last year. In 2022, less than half of respondents, around kind of 44%, indicated that employees were required to file all project-related emails to a central location. This year, that number's actually risen to 58%, which is really good to see. But unfortunately, still 28% still do not require emails to be filed, and so this information is essentially lost. Third is that disputes are continuing to rise year on year. So in our 2021 report, about 63% of respondents experienced some form of dispute in the business, and this year that number has actually risen to a very high 91%. Project scope changes and payments continue to be the leading cause of these disputes. Considering the majority of project scope information resides in emails and formal documents, and firms can't easily access these, it's hardly surprising that they are continuing to dig themselves into a bit of trouble. And finally, email is still the most used communication and collaboration tool in the industry, as we kind of touched upon earlier. More than 4/5 of respondents report that most of their project correspondence is via email, and only 19% of the respondents use email for less than half of their project correspondence. So when we asked about the business's reliance on email, 11% of people surveyed say that email is now business critical in their organizations, with most people agreeing that reliance on email has increased in the last kind of 12 months. And for the purpose of our session today, we'll only really be focusing on the disputes angle of our research, but we will be emailing everyone a copy of our full research report in the next few days as well. So according to the World Bank, we are currently in the second year of sharply slowing economic growth, only overshadowed by the global recession in 2009 and 2020. And in the AEC, we're seeing trends where costs are on the rise, margins are tighter than ever, and there are large staff cutbacks. Even larger global firms have reported huge drop-offs in profit as their staff costs are increasing. And unfortunately, more firms are going into administration than ever. And with so much uncertainty and so many people leaving businesses, there is a strong need for organizations to think about their information management. How can you be sure that you have access to all documents and correspondence if staff are to leave the business? Considering that 28% of businesses do not have email filing as part of their offboarding process, and 81% of firms use email for the majority of their project correspondence, thousands of firms are at risk of losing information. Even more concerning is the findings that 55% of those surveys indicated they did not have any email management systems in place. Now, I'm sure everyone on the webinar today has heard or read that email is dead, but at least in our industry, these claims are inaccurate. In 2023, 88% of survey respondents indicated that their overall volume of emails has actually increased in the last 12 months. And this is a stark increase from the year before. And the contents of these emails are more important than ever, with 11% of people claiming it's now business critical. On top of this, almost 2/3 of AEC businesses regularly need to retrieve emails from past projects, with only 2% never having the need. And over the last 3 years of this research report, these numbers have remained consistent. Many can relate to not always, needing to refer to previous emails. However, only 1 or 2% actually never need to do that. And for many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not a consideration until things go wrong. And as we can see, they hold vital information that could mean the difference between winning and losing a dispute. So unfortunately, we're seeing that project costs continue to spiral, which has led to an increase in disputes within the AEC. Our research found that only 9% of people surveyed have not experienced a dispute in the last 12 months. And this is significantly higher than the previous 2 years of this research report, even beating kind of pre-pandemic records. So with 63% of organizations reported experiencing a dispute in the businesses in 2021. This number's now rose to 78% in 2022 and then 91% in 2023. The top causes were issues related to project scope changes and actually kind of chasing payments. This kind of follows similar trends to what we've seen in the previous 2 years of this research report. And unfortunately for the industry, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. And in terms of why that might be, the majority, around 85% of information relating to scope changes are stored in email and formal documents. And to break this down a little bit further, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in a digital space at all. And shockingly, kind of 11% of respondents highlighted the only place that they are kept is in the project manager's head. And in 2020, kind of pre-COVID, that was 6.2%, which shows quite an alarming increase of AEC firms not formally recording project scope changes in the past 3 years. And with findings like this, it's kind of hardly surprising that 90% of businesses are concerned about their project information not being readily available or accessible. And in fact, 1/3 of respondents indicated they are kind of very concerned by this. Understandably, organizations with an email management tool in place, such as Mail Manager, reported even less overall concern with their information being visible by their teams compared to those without a tool in place. What we're going to do is we're going to launch another poll now. If your firm was in a legal dispute relating to a project, what information do you think you would need to retrieve to evidence your case? Now, hopefully not all of you have kind of experienced a dispute and that's completely fine, but just hypothetically, what information do you or your firm think you would need to protect yourselves? And I'll just give this kind of a minute or so to understand everyone's responses. On this one, of course, it is kind of multiple choice, so please answer as many or as little as you think you would need to be ready for that dispute and evidence your case.
Okay, so 17.5% of people said contracts. 20% of people said evidence of correspondence relating to scope and agreements. 14% of people said drawing approvals. 16% of people said historic project information. 13.6% of people said information from people who have left the business. 13.6% of people said sensitive financial documents, and 3.4% is registering as other.
Okay. Yeah, it's a nice mix of responses, and it's definitely kind of not a trick question. Firms often do need all of these things, and as we've kind of seen from our research report this year, the firms that really leave themselves open to disputes are those who do not have this information in hand when things go wrong. And even in a situation where the disagreement might be minor, it's always good to have kind of an audit trail of why certain actions have actually been made. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for putting the time in to respond to that one. So in terms of dispute resolution, we're kind of constantly seeing that failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that result in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis's 2022 Global Construction Disputes Report, the average value of disputes was around $52.6 million, and with an average length of 15.4 months. So firms can't really afford to let information like email correspondence slip through the cracks. We've seen this kind of leaky bucket of email negatively affecting AEC firms globally recently, and firms must be aware of their kind of corporate history and be able to prove everything that has happened on projects, especially as the stakes are so high. A recent disaster that has shaken the kind of UK AEC industry was the fire at Grenfell Tower in London, and sadly 72 people lost their lives for that. And this was one of the UK's kind of probably worst modern construction disasters. I know a lot of you on the call probably going to be based US, but UK as well. So just as a quick summary, that the fire was caused by an electrical fault and spread quickly due to highly flammable cladding used in the building. And in the inquiry, damning emails were uncovered, indicating that certain parties were aware that the cladding materials used were actually unsafe. And given the nature of the kind of industry that everyone operates in, firms do need to guarantee information visibility and accessibility to ensure they are making the right decisions. In the best cases, kind of poor information management costs firms money, but in the worst, it actually makes people unsafe. And given the size of the global disputes environment, the cost of mismanaging emails is immense and includes things such as kind of information being locked in individuals' inboxes, staff wasting time looking for information they need to do their job, and then staff maybe leaving the business or going on holiday perhaps, but a range of important information is then trapped in their inbox. But with proper email management processes in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by the entire project team. This will reduce the risk of rework and stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have this information to hand years down the line should a liability dispute arise, perhaps. So that has just been kind of a quick overview of our 2023 State of AEC report. What we'll do is we'll send out the full report, as I mentioned, the next few days if you're interested and can read it in more detail. But what does this actually mean for information management, and how can you kind of help avoid disputes going forward? So luckily for us, the technology advancements are continuing to improve how we work. And as I touched on earlier, architecture firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiencies. VR and kind of 3D printing means you can identify any errors before construction. And BIM advancements mean that team members can all be on the same page. The use of BIM has seen several benefits to the global AEC industry, including reduced waste, improved collaboration, enhanced productivity, time savings, and overall kind of increased technologies and adoption. It's improving safety kind of across the industry and provides deep insights into existing buildings as well. In fact, the kind of following the Champlain Towers collapse in Florida, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology have utilized BIM and digital modeling to investigate actually why the building collapsed. And then as a kind of internal standard, ISO 19650 has been developed to set a standard of how buildings and civil engineering works should be organized and digitized, including when BIM is being used. So while all this kind of new tech is making our lives easier and really boosting the industry, it's hardly surprising that it's harder than ever to access project information and ensure that teams follow information management processes. We have access to a massive amount of information, both inside and outside of our organizations, and this sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored in documents and correspondence, and it can often be quite inaccessible, stored in disparate applications by various departments or even offices. And information is kind of the lifeblood of all project work, but only if it's actually well organized, accessible, secure and updated, and that's kind of no easy task. But I guess in terms of what's the solution, you kind of need a single place where all your project and client information is stored, so you can see the complete picture of any given project you're working on, and what that's called is a kind of single source of truth. It's one of the buzzwords we hear quite a lot, and the single source of truth, also known as the golden thread of information, is a concept based around bringing all information together, ensuring everyone in an organization has access to everything they need before making any business decisions. The term golden thread came about following the Grenfell tragedy here in the UK, and it is a digital record of securely created, updated and accessible information covering the entirety of a building's life cycle, including design, construction and management. A single source of truth provides better working methods and encourages more transparent communications. And this is helping organizations drive change faster without compromising quality. And it does ensure that all projects and client teams have access to the correct information they need when they need it. Managing information in one place is critical to avoiding disputes, and when done right, allows teams to use their time, resource, and knowledge to make the right decisions at the right time. And you might be thinking, this sounds quite overwhelming, but definitely the tech is on our side. The two easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing manual processes from information sharing and increasing information visibility across the board. So one thing to keep in mind is that if your single source of truth is not fully complete, it's not actually the truth. What we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about how their documents and contracts are managed, email is the one thing everybody manages differently. And without the right tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices. Some people will move emails into their Outlook folders, some might save important information to their individual desktops, and others will just simply delete it if they don't see any need for it any longer. In all of these scenarios, though, that information is trapped in silos and inaccessible to the wider project team. As I said, information is kind of the lifeblood of all our project work, but only if it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated. Losing access to essential emails or not including them in your overall information management strategy can prove detrimental to firms. And when emails are managed correctly, everyone in an organization has access to the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time. It provides a much better way of working, encourages more transparent communication, and ensures that all teams have access to that single source of truth. And plus it removes the responsibility of storing and managing data from one person or even department. So it's time to kind of avoid these common email headaches. And these are ones I kind of hear every day. This isn't what we agreed. When did you tell us this? John's left the company, so I'm coming in a bit cold to this. I need X, Y, and Z before our meeting, and then I forward on that email. And I think probably most of us on the call would have had at least one of these at some point in the last few months. And AC firms can all kind of benefit from a single source of truth. Some of the key benefits of centralized information would be, your data becoming more discoverable, and eliminating that human error we mentioned through automating those workflows to make sure people are actually doing it, establishing version controls. We've always got the up-to-date what we're looking at, reducing the amount of time wasted on searching for and recreating lost documents. So again, that kind of project rework, increasing transparency and traceability, and then complying with those regulatory and legal requirements such as the Golden Thread or ISO. And that's where kind of we, IdeaGen Mail Manager, that's where we come in essentially. So who are we, and kind of why are we talking to you all today? I'm sure everyone on this call at some point may have heard or even worked with Arup. And for those who haven't, they're a global consultancy firm who have worked on design and engineering projects, including we've got the Sydney Opera House on the screen there, but also the Queensferry Crossing, and more recently the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. So what Arup did is they actually built Mail Manager probably about 12 or 15 years ago internally now. And the main reason was they had no control over how their staff managed their emails. Yes, they had some processes in place. They tried things like public folders or product email addresses, or kind of getting people to manually drag and drop. But the problem was all the processes relied on individuals to remember to do it and actually kind of decide on what is and what isn't important, which, as I'm sure we can all imagine, didn't really happen. So the two issues were mainly project teams didn't have any up-to-date information on their projects as a whole, especially if, say, someone was new on a project or maybe even someone left. But then another big thing was that risk. For Arup, they had to retain data for up to 14 years after a project was finished in case of any claims of litigation. And yeah, there was a chance you'd be able to go back and find that data, but it would be extremely time consuming to do so, and sometimes it just wouldn't even be there. So what Arup wanted to do is they wanted to find a system that would allow project teams to be able to find any email across the project within a few clicks, but you had to kind of take away the time spent filing, and most importantly, the reliance. If you're asking people to drag and drop or like tag an email again, it just wasn't going to work. And they needed something really they could turn on overnight, would just start learning people's behaviors, and would mean they wouldn't have to discuss email management ever again. Interestingly, they couldn't actually find anything off the shelf that let them do that. So given the size of the IT team and the company itself, they actually decided to write their own system. And that's kind of where we are today. It wasn't intentionally a product, it just grew naturally. And on the screens, some of the firms that we kind of work with, some of the slightly larger firms, but it's not a case of we only work with big companies. Actually, probably majority of our companies are more in that kind of 10 to 100 size. And the tool's the same for everyone. It just depends how you work as a company. So one of our long-term customers that you may have heard of is Ramboll. And for those of you who don't, again, Ramboll is an engineering consultancy firm. They've got over 17,000 employees across 27 locations globally. They have a strong representation across the world, particularly in the Nordics, Americas, India, and the UK. And this allows the company to pride itself in not just making a difference to its clients, but also to its employees, the environment, and society as a whole. What these locations allow them to cover, they allow them to cover a broad range of markets such as transport, buildings, environment and health, and also restoration. And they work on large range of projects across their offices daily, with teams kind of scattered strategically to meet the needs of their clients. So before Mail Manager was initially introduced to the business, it was back in 2009. Ramboll's project email management process was manual and very time consuming. These introduced a fundamental challenge in regards to efficiency, consistency, and productivity for their projects. And whilst their global offices were not working on projects together as such, each project had numerous members, and they found that there was inconsistency in having access to all project emails. Either emails were not being filed centrally or simply were being locked in people's inboxes. A particular project member realized that something had to be done. And the first time in doing this was to introduce a central way of filing and searching for emails. Ramboll was overwhelmed with important project information. They needed to implement an email management tool fast. As with other software projects, procurement within the company, the individual project member went to the market to see what offerings were available, and they drew up a short list of potential solutions that would help them. And Mail Manager was a strong contender. So it was vigorously kind of tried and tested for a particular project. It was quickly identified as a tool that could introduce consistency across Ramboll, whilst also reducing the risk the company was exposed to in regards to compliance. And then shortly after identifying Mail Manager, a business case was built, highlighting its ease of implementation, affordability, and potential benefits to the company. both the procurement team and champion users agreed to proceed with the software. So Mail Manager is now being used heavily across a number of their global offices, including the UK, Sweden, America, and Australia. As the solution has developed over its 10 years at Ramble, it's simply become a way of life at the company, and everyone is now filing their project emails both consistently and centrally. They found that having access to all kind of important project correspondence in a central location invaluable, especially in recent years where compliance and GDPR have become pressing matters. Knowing there's 100% certainty that all project emails will be available is something they can't actually live without. And finding such evidence before would have taken days or even weeks of IT resource. That's assuming they could have actually found it at all, but with the help of Mail Manager's powerful search, it takes less than 2 seconds. And Mail Manager is a tool that can quickly become enviable, especially when parts of a business who are not using Mail Manager see the benefits from it. And this is what happened within Ramble, where in the last year, 2 sites have implemented the add-in. Brilliant. Here's just a couple of other short snippets of some firms that we've worked with, kind of Procom Engineering. We've got IMechE in the US and also Brighter Green Energy. So these are kind of the common problems that we hear, and all of these customer stories that you've heard today tie back to the kind of 4 key issues that are ultimately the reason they want to purchase an email management tool like Mail Manager. The first being kind of they're concerned about the consequences they may face if they were to lose any product information or correspondence. Again, like linking back to those disputes we were mentioning earlier. They or their team spend countless hours every week searching for information contained in emails, or they're wasting time on administration, like manually filing project emails, and that's if they're doing it at all. And then you've got, they're concerned that the lack of control over communication that's coming into and leaving the business. Again, someone might be on holiday or actually leaving that information siloed away. And then finally, is that information being trapped in individuals' inboxes, making it effectively unusable. So with Mail Manager, what we do is we give our customers confidence that any email that has been filed can be retrieved. Businesses can then find any email in seconds. Your productivity will increase as you can find and file any email in seconds. And finally, you'll have the one central space for all of your project management information, helping you create and maintain a single source of truth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up my Outlook and just go over a very brief kind of demonstration of Mail Manager. If you did want kind of more of an in-depth demonstration that's more personalized to yourself, then you can reach out to myself or our kind of sales team, and they'll be able to arrange that. But today I just want to show you a very brief kind of example of filing and searching. And the tool itself, as I mentioned at the start, it is an Outlook plugin. So it is something that's going to live in the ribbon of everyone's Outlooks up here. It's not a big kind of bulky project management tool that's going to take months to implement. It's quite literally an hour and 45 minutes and we'd have you up and running. And in terms of where Mail Manager saves to, it really is where your data is being saved currently. We don't host it. It will be where you want it to be, whether that be SharePoint, a traditional server, or even tools such as Procore or Viewpoint as well. But what Mail Manager doesn't do is it doesn't rely on individuals to make decisions. So what it will do is it will prompt you to file as you action an email. So an action would be opening and closing, sending an email, or like here, I've got to reply to one. So as soon as I kind of give the go ahead that to Ben, click send, that's when the prompt jumps in and says, well, hang on a minute, what's happening to this email? Where is it going? And it won't require you to do the heavy lifting here. What we want to do is make it easy as possible for you and your colleagues. So this will actually use machine learning to predict where email should go. So we'll look at things like the subject of the email, the body of the email, but also who you're speaking with, where you might normally file to when speaking with those people. Here, Gensler project's completely correct. So all I need to do is click send and file, and it will send both my response and the original email to that Gensler project folder, in this case in SharePoint, where now it's accessible by other people in the business as well. And in terms of how they do access that, we have created our own search tool, which again is accessed up here, and we'll bring up this window. And this means that we're no longer searching our own inbox, but we actually have the ability to search anything that we've got permission to view in those central locations, whether it, as I mentioned, whether it be SharePoint or the server. So we've got kind of keyword search up here, similar to how you would do it in Outlook. It will look in the subject or body, but as I'm sure we're aware of, that doesn't really always give us enough information. So we can also go into particular projects here and then use filters on the left-hand side to really kind of whittle down information. So to give you a good overview of the tool and how the search works, if say someone came to me and said, well, we've got a dispute, a client's come back and have said that something we produced 4 years ago is not the same price as what we discussed. And you're thinking, okay, that's fine. You know, who was the person that was involved in that conversation? Oh, she was called Georgina. She doesn't work here anymore. Normally, if I didn't have something like Mail Manager, I'd probably be panicking a bit there. Well, how can we guarantee that she'd saved it? But luckily, we've got this tool in place. So I'll start by going into that project folder. So Genza, that's the client. Okay. But that's probably going to, yeah. So that's 2,500 emails, quite a few for someone to have to scroll through. They mentioned Georgina was the person that would have sent that invoice. So if I type in Georgina's name in this including bar, what it will do is it will just show me the conversations that Georgina was involved in that particular folder. So that straight away is 34, but we can take it down even further. And invoice is what they said they were disputing. So we'll just make sure it's got that in the subject or body. That brings it down to 10, but actually I can go even further. It's an attachment. So if I click on this, I'll just see emails that involve attachments, and that brings it down to 2. A little bit more of a palatable number to scroll through rather than the 2,500 we initially had. So what you can do, you don't have to read every single email, double click and open it up. You can actually preview it on this right-hand side. Yep, great, that's what I want. So when I press open, that's when it will actually pull that email from SharePoint in its original Outlook format, like you can see here. The attachments are available. I can treat it like it was been in my inbox the entire time. I can forward it on, even though it's an email I wasn't involved in. I've still got full scope over that entire conversation, so I can be completely up to date without having to call someone who doesn't work here anymore. Brilliant. So as I mentioned, that was just a short overview of Mail Manager to give you a little taste of what the tool does and how it works. But if you would like to look at more of a personalized demonstration, then please feel free to reach out to myself, and we'll be able to arrange that for you as well. So that's everything from me. I know what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a short Q&A. So if you have put any questions in throughout this, then thank you for doing that, and I'll be able to answer them now.
Okay, thank you very much, Liam. We'll now move on to the Q&A. The first question is, when people leave the business, will we still have access to all emails they've received?
Very good question. So not all emails. So the way Mail Manager works is, as you saw, you would have been prompted to file, and most of the time it's going to be those project related emails. So you don't have access to their inbox, mainly for GDPR reasons, but anything that was project related, that's important. Likelihood is they would have filed it. And then, yes, as you saw there with the search, you'd be able to access that information.
Brilliant. Okay. And another question. Thank you for the demo. Can you advise if Mail Manager will work with Cloud SharePoint?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, so it certainly does. Almost would recommend using something like SharePoint. If you've got the cloud feature, it means that it doesn't matter if you are on site or anywhere really, as long as you've got Wi-Fi connection, you've got the ability to file and search emails, and you'd also be able to use our mobile app. So even if you've got no access to your laptop, again, you could still file and search those materials. So certainly does work with SharePoint, would be my kind of preferred solution, I would say.
Okay, great. Another question. Do you have to educate personnel to use better email titles to improve results?
So it's one of those things. It can't hurt. If it's clearly got the project number in the subject, then yes, it's extremely likely it's going to get it bang on. However, the way the tool works is it learns your staff's individual behaviors. So even if they don't put anything relative to the project in the subject or body, it will still be thinking about who they're speaking with and where they've filed to before when speaking with those people. So yeah, it's certainly a good thing if you can do it, but if you can't, it's not the end of the world. The tool is still going to be able to help you file and certainly make it a lot easier.
Okay, great. Another question here. How does Mail Manager manage permissions?
So what it does is it mimics the permissions you've already got set up. So whether that be on a server or SharePoint, I'm sure we've already going to have some areas that people do and don't have access to. Mail Manager would mimic those. So if you had a directors folder, only the directors have access to, and you make a Mail Manager link, only those same directors are able to file and search into those folders as well.
Okay, and Colin Catchpole asks, increasingly other forms of communication are taking over from email, especially Teams messaging, both internal and external. Is there any plan to incorporate this into the tool?
Yes, so we do already have a Teams filing ability, which essentially means you can select certain messages and file those to central locations with Mail Manager. It's been launched recently, I think back in September, so we're constantly working on it to make it easier and easier to file with Teams. But yes, Colin, it is something that is now available and you would be able to do, as we're noticing that increase as well.
Okay, great. And Trevor Tate asks, is there a limit to the number of projects you can define? We maybe have 200 projects per year.
No limit. So yeah, I think for me, I've got thousands, and that's the benefit, I suppose, of the way the tool works is it's highlighting what it thinks it should be filing to. So even if you had 100,000 projects you could file to, you're not actually going to see those. They're available, but you're only really going to see the ones that either you're working on or it recommends. But there's no limit whatsoever. You can add as many projects as you want.
Okay. And what happens with duplicate emails?
Very good question. So I didn't show it in the demonstration, but essentially every email that gets filed will be tagged, and it will have a timestamp, which is right down to the second. And that means that if 5 people get CC'd in the same email and they file it to the same location, it will recognize it's got 5 of the same timestamp, delete 4 of them, and leave you with 1. So we find actually that kind of saves about a third in storage roughly.
Fab. Okay. And Sam Brown says, thank you both. Can you please email me a copy of this presentation along with costings for us to consider?
Yes, certainly. Certainly can, Sam. We'll be sending the presentation after this to everyone. With costings, it depends on how many users. What I would recommend is sending me an email following this, which is just liam.jones@ideagen.com. I'll be able to arrange a call with you. We can run through the tool and costings following this.
Okay, fab. Another question here. When people leave the business, will we still have access to all the emails they've received?
Same answer as before with that one. It's not going to be a case of you can see their entire inbox, again, for GDPR reasons, but anything they have filed to that central location, yes, you'll be able to see.
I think we've got one more question here. What happens with sensitive emails?
So depending on, I suppose, the content, if it's personal sensitive, everyone gets their own personal filing location. So, for me, it'd be kind of pay slips and things like that. I would file there. No one else can access that. If it's business sensitive, again, you would be able to create folders in, let's just say, SharePoint, and just give people permission to access those and then file there. Only the people you gave permission to see that area in your central location will be able to file and search into it. So that's how you kind of deal with those sensitive emails.
Okay, great. I've just seen another one come in. Where are emails filed through Mail Manager?
So that will depend on where your central location is. So we never host any of the data. We can't access it. So if that's SharePoint, fine. If it's a server, it's a server. It completely depends on where you want to do it. We're more of kind of a middleman, taking that information to your central location rather than holding onto the data for you.
Okay, I can't currently see any more questions. If anyone's got any more questions, please ask them now. Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Liam, for presenting. We hope to see you at our next IMechE webinar, but for now, have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.